All right. I think we are good. Uh-oh. Are we on? No. Are we good? Offline? All that sending data. All right, perfect. I think we are back. So let me double check my Facebook. Good evening. Good evening. We're just getting everything set up. Had a couple issues on the streaming app. So I'm just trying to get everything squared away. All right, perfect. So let me share this and share it to a page. We'll do that. Perfect. And then we're actually going to do a screen share. Got it. Got it. Screen share. All right, perfect. So we got that done. All right. Woo. All right, we did it. Perfect, perfect. So before I forget, actually, I'm gonna move this over here like that. All right, so good evening, everyone. Good evening. So what we're going to do today is we are going to go over basically your multifamily real estate investing team. This is actually the second time we've held this webinar tonight or this month, excuse me. And basically just want to kind of give you a little bit more insight, a little bit more education on how to build your core investment team. And then we'll just touch on some of the people that you need in your secondary investment team. And this is particularly from the aspect if you want to invest as a team to invest in bigger deals, or if you want to invest as a team in more deals. What this will allow you to do is basically there's strength in numbers, right? Very, very basic concept. And by there being strength in numbers, it allows you to take advantage of the amount of leverage that commercial real estate allows. And you can also take advantage of this type of leverage in residential, depending on the size of the deals and how extensive the agreement is between the investors. But when you get into the commercial space, you eventually get to a point if you want to continue to invest, depending on where you start or where you're starting. You may get to a point where you decide that, hey, I want to invest with other people. Either you're tired of spending all of your money, or the deals that you're looking at are outside of your investing capacity right now. So you just want to take advantage of leveraging a team, leveraging the commercial real estate. So that's what we'll talk about. So anyway, if you don't know who I am, just really briefly, I'm a multifamily investment advisor with eXp Commercial. And I'm also a real estate investor. I started off as a realtor and I became a broker and represented a lot of investors in the residential space. Decided I wanted to become an investor, wanted to be a developer. And my big goal was I wanted to build big buildings. And I still want to build big buildings, but my focus is not strictly on the development piece. The development is part of it, but I've since migrated into really understanding the importance of having that existing cash flow stream. Ideally, when you're investing, development is a much riskier proposal, and there are just a lot of benefits when you're able to have an existing revenue stream in your development project or in your investment vehicle when it comes to real estate. And that's a whole nother topic that I can talk about at another time. But anyway, so yeah, that's why I decided to kind of focus on multifamily, and made a decision a couple of years ago that I wanted to transition my entire real estate career focus into the multifamily space. So that's the short version. And that leads us to where we are today. So quick quote for you. As one of the things that I do is I do a lot of teaching, I do a lot of educating. And as I was putting this together, when I put my slides together, I like to add different quotes to just kind of give added perspective and added context. And as I was putting this one together, it made me think about this quote where an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And it was actually, the quote was already a part of the template that I was using for this presentation, but it just reminded me of Ben Franklin and Poor Richard's Almanac, and just some of the other financial insight and advice that Ben Franklin is known for giving. And if you haven't read Poor Richard's Almanac, or if you haven't really studied Ben Franklin was an accomplished investor. He was also the postmaster of the United States, but he was an accomplished businessman as well. So definitely a lot of nuggets. But when we talk about an investment and knowledge pays the best interest, well, my entire journey in real estate, from when I first had a real deep exposure to real estate in 2008 to where I am now, the biggest difference has been the amount of knowledge and information that I've been able to take in. So, and that investment in knowledge has allowed me to build a bigger platform. It has allowed me to have more knowledge and expertise and experience in real estate as a whole on a much bigger and broader scale. And no matter what happens, no matter whether your business fails, no matter whether your investments go bad, no matter whether you get sick, the one thing that people can't take away from you is the knowledge that you have. So investing in your knowledge is going to pay the best interest, because that knowledge just builds on top of itself. And when we're talking about something as black and white and as numbers based as investing, it's very easy to see how your ability to reap a return from your knowledge can pay a much higher interest than anything else. Just a quick quote for you. And if you're watching on Instagram, I'm also streaming this live on Instagram. But if you want to actually watch the presentation, I'm doing a presentation over YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn, and also my Facebook group. But if you're watching on IG, y'all gonna miss out on the PowerPoint presentation, but hopefully you'll still get some of these nuggets. So let's move on. So what is this webinar about? Tonight, we're talking about your multifamily real estate investing team. And we're just going to touch on a couple bullet points. We'll talk about why might you want to invest with a team? What are some of the basic core team structures, or what is the basic core team structure? We're also going to talk about the roles and responsibilities of that team and how you can basically break down that team environment so that everyone has their individual roles and responsibilities, and it allows everyone to play off of their strengths. And we'll also touch on why that's important. We'll also talk a little bit about what those ownership percentages look like, because as your core investment team and your secondary team, you're obviously going to want to be able to break down the profit pie. And so there are some common ratios of which each individual role might potentially be compensated for. And then we'll talk a little bit about your secondary team structure. What's up, team? What's up, team? I see I2M in the building. We are going live on a couple different platforms. So if you want to see the presentation, you got to hop on some of my other platforms. But anyway, so we'll touch on the secondary team structure. We won't go into a lot of detail on this presentation, but we will give a high level overview just so you have a clear idea who are some of the other folks that you're going to need. All right, so why a multifamily investing team? So real estate is definitely a team sport. And depending on what type of real estate you're doing, whether it's a personal investment and you're investing in, say, a personal residence versus, let's say, if you're investing in mobile homes or you're investing in hotels, in this case, we're talking about multifamily. Either way, depending on the investment vehicle, there's going to be a team that you need. And typically the team that is going to be, right, your lender, your real estate broker. Those are some of the basic levels. And actually those people of your secondary investment team. But when you're investing and you're trying to build a group of people who are going to invest together, then those individuals are going to be a totally different makeup. And the reason why you might want to have a core investment team is because it's going to allow you to do more deals. It's going to allow you to do bigger deals. It's going to allow you to take advantage. Again, I mentioned leverage, and leverage being one of the main ways that millionaires become millionaires, billionaires become billionaires, the wealthy become wealthy, the wealthy stay wealthy, the rich become rich, because they learn how to utilize leverage in the various forms. There are forms of leverage, and real estate is one of them. Multifamily is one of, touch on that. I actually don't have a slide in here about leverage, but I'll touch on that a little bit. And then also, when you invest with a team, it allows you to have a deeper level of specialization. So let's say, for example, you are a very analytical person. You are a numbers-based person. Well, because you're numbers-based, because you're more analytical, you're probably like me, and your natural desire or your natural ability is not so much always being in the front or always talking to people or always being the voice that's, being heard. It's more of kind of being the reserved person. Now, that's how I used to be, right? I've had to make some adjustments. But if that's your natural tendency, you may have a more natural preference for being a numbers person as opposed to being the investor relations person, where you have to do a lot more presenting and a lot more speaking and a lot more communicating in public. So if that's your specialty, then your role might be in acquisitions, where you can focus more on running the numbers on deals as opposed to giving presentations. And then also risk. By investing with the team, it allows you to essentially, again, leverage the risk and reduce some of your risk exposure, because you're not the only person putting up all of the money for the deal. But at the same time, it's not just the risk of the financial risk, it's also the risk of, am I making the right decision? Am I covering all the bases? Do I have all of the knowledge and experience that I need? So you can kind of leverage that risk by also leveraging other people's knowledge and expertise. So those are some of the reasons why you might want to invest as a team. Now, mind you, these principles that we're talking about, they're not just for multifamily investing. You can apply these across all the different investment classes, especially as we're talking about bigger deals. But in this case, we're just talking specifically multifamily. But again, these are principles that you can apply across the board. Now, let me take a drink of water. I'm actually happy just to be giving this presentation tonight. I was down sick for a little bit and still trying to get over it. So my throat is, gets dry really easily. So if you hear me coughing, if I got to take a drink of water, that's why. So anyway, let's talk about your basic team structure to acquire more deals. Here's an overview of who the key players are. So at a basic level, let's think of the players on the left-hand side. Let's think of the players on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you're going to have your general partnership. And on the right-hand side, you're going to have your limited partnership. Your general partnership is going to be that core team of individuals. And that core team, it might be 2 people, it might be 3 people, it might be 5 people, it might be 10 people. But that's the core team who is making all of the decisions, and they're the ones who are actively involved in looking for deals, negotiating for deals, actually facilitating the transaction to close the deal. They're the ones managing the deal all the way through the entire life cycle of the deal. And when we talk about the life cycle of a deal, we're talking about from acquisition to disposition. The entire acquisition process is literally from developing what the investment criteria is all the way through to making the decision of whether or not to refinance or whether or not to sell that property. That's the general partnership. They're the ones who make all the high level decisions. Then on the right-hand side, you have your limited partnership or your limited partners, and that's exactly how it sounds. They have a limited role in the transaction. They don't make any of the decisions in terms of, the life cycle of the deal, the acquisition, disposition. They're just members in the overall investment, and they're essentially hands off. We also call them passive investors because the investment vehicle, they don't have to do anything other than invest their capital. So the investment vehicle itself is totally passive. So to give you an example of what a passive investment might look like, let's say you have a 401k, and every month or every week or every 2 weeks, you're automatically investing money into that 401k, and that's it. You're totally hands off. But every quarter, every month, whenever you log in, you can see how your investment is doing. Well, that's a passive investment. You're basically a limited partner in these investments that your portfolio is invested in. And then whoever you're invested in, that company, that mutual fund, whoever is managing that, they're the ones who are making the active decisions, and you're reaping the rewards as a passive investor. Now, when we talk about the general partnership versus the limited partnership, there are certain roles and responsibilities that come with each one. So under the general partnership, and we'll just touch on these briefly, I'll move on to the next slide. But when it comes to the general partnership, for the most, there are basically 5 areas of, I don't want to say 5 tasks, but considering it more so 5 is of roles and responsibilities. Those 5 areas being your risk capital, number 2 being your acquisitions, number 3 being your loan guarantee, number 4 being your investor relations, and number 5 being your asset management. Again, those are all different roles and responsibilities, but those are the 5 core areas that that general partnership is going to be responsible for. And then I'll touch on each of those in a second. Now, in terms of the limited partnership, they really have one main role and responsibility, but sometimes they may fill 2 roles and responsibilities. And their main role is to provide investment capital to the deal. Now, to take that a little bit further, they may also provide what's considered risk capital for the deal. But as you can see, number 1 and number 2 really falls under, because they're still providing investment capital for the deal. Is just a different type of investment capital. So if you're watching on Facebook and Instagram, or excuse me, not Instagram, really if you're watching across all channels, go ahead. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I won't look at them until we get through the entire presentation, because I am doing a screen share. But if you do have any questions, just put them in the chat. If I don't get to them at the conclusion, I'll circle back and I'll put them in the comments just to make sure I get to all of them. Now, let's talk a little bit more in detail about the roles and the responsibilities. So for the core team, that core general partnership team, those role responsibilities, number 1 is going to be risk capital. Risk capital is essentially the money that someone, either one individual or a group of people, put up in order to cover the due diligence costs on the deal. You might be asking, okay, well, what are due diligence costs? Well, due diligence costs are essentially, once you go under contract for a deal, there are certain costs that are incurred before you actually buy or purchase the deal. So if you think about, if you've ever bought a home, before you bought that home, while you were under contract, that's the due diligence phase. And so what were some of the things that you did during that process? Well, you have to get a home inspection, right? You may have had to get a termite inspection, a radon inspection, a lead paint inspection. Well, those are due diligence costs. And those were costs, some of which that you have to pay for, like your appraisal, right? That's a due diligence cost. Well, it's the same way when you're investing in commercial real estate. There are due diligence costs, but the due diligence costs are significantly higher in commercial than they are in residential. And by significant, I mean, it could be, depending on how you structure the deal and what paperwork needs to be done, it could be $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, even $100,000 in due diligence costs. And that's costs that have to be paid for, whether or not you actually close on that deal. So that's why it's called risk, because you're taking a risk and you may not close on that deal. So that money is at risk. And once you close, or if you don't close, all of the money is lost. But if you do close on that deal, then that risk capital is reimbursed to whoever puts up the risk capital at closing. So it's money you got to put up, but it's money you also get back. So that's the first major role and responsibility. The second one is going to be your acquisitions. Now, your acquisitions role, their main job is to find deals, review deals, underwrite deals, submit the letters of intent, and ratify contracts, or what's called your purchase and sell agreements. Now, as you can see, that's a big role. You got to find deals. You got to review deals. you got to underwrite deals, you have to submit the LOIs, and you have to do the negotiations. Now, to dig into that a little deeper, when it comes to finding deals, you have to be networking with brokers, networking with agents, networking with wholesalers, networking with other investors. When it comes to reviewing deals, you got to check and confirm that these deals actually fit the investment criteria for the investment group. When it comes to submitting LOIs, there's documentation that has to be prepared. There's certain nuances of how you want this deal to potentially look that has to go into the LOI. And then there's the negotiation phase. So it's a very heavily involved process. And on the front end of the transaction, it's the most important component when it comes to determining whether or not this deal is going to make financial sense for the investment group. And when you're thinking about investing as a group, there are a lot of numbers and a lot of parameters that have to basically check off in order to confirm that, hey, this deal is going to make financial sense and we're not going to lose money on this deal. So acquisitions is a very, very important piece to the equation. Then the next role is going to be your sponsor, your key principal, or your loan guarantor. Those three words are essentially synonymous. They mean the exact same thing. I'll repeat that again. Your deal sponsor, your key principal, and your loan guarantor are all the same person. Now, again, that could be several people, but it's basically the same person in terms of title. So when you're looking at deals, you're looking at emails coming from different people. When you're, depending on what phase you're in terms of looking towards investing, you'll see that term used interchangeably. And essentially that person is the person or persons who are responsible for signing on the loan and satisfying the loan requirements. So when it comes to qualifying for a commercial loan, you may say, okay, well, what are we trying to satisfy? Well, the two biggest things are going to be the net worth requirement and the liquidity requirement. The net worth of the sponsor, key guarantor, key principal and loan guarantor, their net worth minus their principal residence has to be equal to the loan amount. So when we're talking about these commercial deals, it could be $1 million deal, it could be 1.5, it could be a 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 25 million, it could be a $50 million deal. Whatever that loan amount is going to be, and that loan amount is probably going to be somewhere between 70 to 80% of the purchase price, there has to be an equivalent in terms of net worth in order to secure that that loan for that property. And then there's also liquidity requirements, and liquidity is essentially how much in access to cash do you have in relation to what that loan amount is. So there has to be that showing on a bank statement or some type of financial statement somewhere, so that the lender knows you have access to the financial resources in case there's a downtick in your rents. You still got to be able to cover the mortgage in the short term, as well as any unexpected expenses that may pop up once you actually close on the deal. And then the next role is going to be your investor relations. Again, another big component. Now, before I go to investor relations, if you're one of the people who is helping with securing the loan, there is an added bonus. Not only do you get an ownership percentage in the transaction, or you can, depending on how everything is negotiated, you can get an ownership percentage in the deal, but you also get compensated separately for filling that role. So once the deal closes, you also can get compensated at the deal closing, and that compensation can be substantial. And then for investor relations, this is another role and responsibility. The investor relations person, they're responsible for building relationships, finding passive investors, and maintaining ongoing communication throughout the life of the property, throughout the life of the ownership of the property. They're responsible for having that ongoing communication with your limited partners. So once the deal comes together, the general partnership, that core team, they're going to manage that investment. And throughout the life of the ownership of that investment, they still have to maintain communication with the investors who are on the right side of the equation. And so that ongoing communication is going to be a mix of monthly communication, quarterly communication, in addition to the communication that comes out with the regular updates for the financials. How is the deal performing financially? There has to be that ongoing communication. So investor relations is another very big part of the equation, because while the acquisitions team is out looking for deals, the investor relation team, they're looking for passive investors. They're looking for limited partners. They're building relationships. They're making presentations. They're asking for the investment, and then they're managing that relationship throughout the life of the deal. So that's another very, very big and important role. And again, it could be one person, it could be 5 people, it could be 10 people. It all depends on how that general partnership comes together and how many people are involved with the general partnership. And then finally, the last role is going to be your asset management. Your asset management phase is once we close on a property, whoever's a part of the asset management team, they're responsible for literally managing the investment itself, managing the property itself. Now, because we're talking about leverage, we're talking about building your team, you're going to leverage an additional person, depending on how big the property is and whether or not that property financially can handle the additional expense of a property manager. If it can't, or let's say you keep the property management in-house because you have a property manager who's a part of your team, you're going to leverage that person, that property manager, to manage the asset. Now, let's say it's a third-party property manager who's managing the asset, then the person who's on the asset management team for the core, for the general partnership, they're going to manage the property manager. They're going to visit the property on a routine basis, and they're going to make sure that the property manager is managing the property according to standard, according to agreement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another big part of the roles and the responsibilities. All right. Hopefully I got enough voice to get through the next 20 minutes or so. All right. So when it comes to the general partnership, and we're breaking down ownership percentages within that core deal team, every role and responsibility also gets ownership percentage, and that typically falls within a range. Now it's negotiable, but there is a standard range of which we can start the negotiations depending on the deal. Now, if you are providing the risk capital, you can potentially negotiate upwards of about 5% in terms of an equity stake in the deal itself. If you're handling acquisitions, that percentage is going to be up to about a 20% equity stake. If you're a loan sponsor, a deal sponsor, a key principal, you're negotiating upwards of about 5% in equity ownership. If you're a part of the investor relations, you're negotiating upwards of about 35% equity ownership. And then the same goes for asset management. If you're a part of the asset management team, you're negotiating upwards of about 35%. Now, let's say there are 5 people or 4 people who are a part of the acquisitions team, then let's say each person will get about 4% or upwards of 4% based on their role as part of the acquisitions team. So that overall percentage is also going to be broken down by how many people are making up that particular role and responsibility. Now, when we talk about our limited partners, all right, moving on to the next side. Now, when we talk about our limited partners and what their options are, they have basically 2 options or 2 roles and responsibilities. They can either be an equity investor, which most investors, most limited partners are probably going to fall into that equity investor role, but they also can serve as a debt investor where they're now, I'll start with equity. Now, from an equity standpoint, if they're an equity investor, they're just basically investing their capital in the deal. They're getting an ownership percentage as part of the limited partnership. They're also entitled to a portion of the profits when we either sell or refinance the deal, depending on how the deal is structured. They're getting ongoing cash flow distributions. If the distributions for that deal are on a monthly basis, you get a cash flow distribution on a monthly basis. If it's being done on a quarterly basis, you're getting it on a quarterly, or if it's done on an annual, you're getting your cash flow distribution on an annual basis. You're also taking a passive role in the transaction. You're basically hands off. Now, if you are a debt investor, the debt investor typically has a lower risk, but they also have a lower ownership stake in the property. They're not an equity investor, so they don't have an ownership piece in the property itself. They are basically providing a loan on the property, and so their ownership stake is secured by the mortgage. So when you think of a debt investor, think of it again. Let's say you bought a house. Well, the lender who provided a loan for you to buy that house, they're a debt investor. They've invested in you. They've provided you with a loan. And in order to secure their position as an investor in that property, they have a lien holder position on that property. They don't have title to the property, right? Like they aren't the title owner, but they're the debt owner on the property. And so if you default on your loan, they have the ability to take back possession of that property. Well, it's the same way with the debt investor. That debt investor is getting a fixed interest rate, right? They could get an adjustable rate if you're providing the adjustable rate, but most likely it's going to be a fixed rate. It's based on the collateral of the property. It's also a passive role, but the only thing that they're getting is they're getting their payment, their mortgage payment, their debt payment on the loan. They don't have any equity in the deal itself. And why that might be advantageous, for somebody who has a substantial amount of money. They just want to park it. They want that security of investment, and they only want a low interest rate so that they can stay above inflation. And that's the only involvement they want to have. It's really going to depend on the investor and what their investment criteria is as a passive investor. All right, so let's see what the breakdown is. When we break down again, and we go back to the early slides we were talking about, on the left-hand side, you have your general partnership. On the right-hand side, you have your limited partnership. Well, between those two sides, right, we talked about there's a ownership percentage breakdown within the general partnership. Now, on the limited partnership side, there's a total breakdown between the limited partners and the general partners. And then within a general partnership, there's a breakdown within that. So generally, we'll say that negotiation is all up for negotiation. Sometimes it depends on who's sponsoring the deal. It may not be up for negotiation. But generally, we'll say that partnership between the limited partners and the general partners, we'll say it's 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 40-60, going one way or the other. But generally, let's say it's a 50-50 partnership, 50-50 to the limited partners, or 50% to the limited partners, 50% to the general partners. And then of that, again, 50% that goes to the general partners. We're going to break that down according to the roles and responsibilities. And then that's going to be a breakdown against the cash flow and the appreciation on the investment itself. All right. So just double checking. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. We're almost done with the slides, so I'm going to circle back and double check for questions. But moving on, we've just finished the initial core investment team. So just to recap really quickly, you have general partners, you have limited partners, you have different roles and responsibilities depending on what side of the equation you're on. And I didn't mention this, but if you are a general partner, you also can be considered a limited partner if you're also investing money in the deal outside of whatever money you may or may not be required to invest as part of the core team. So you can be both, again, depending on what type of investment you're making. Now, moving on from your core team is what's going to empower you to do more deals. It's going to give you the leverage, and it gives you leverage because, again, you have that team approach. It allows you to do more deals because you have the efficiency of working in a team. So you can find deals faster, you can review deals faster, you can analyze deals faster, you can put in offers faster, right? So there's the efficiency factor. And then when you add in the limited partners, there's the capacity factor where you exponentially grow your capacity because you're now able to essentially raise an unlimited amount of capital. So when you have access to an unlimited amount of capital, what does that mean? It means you can do more deals. So that's where the power of leverage comes in, the power of the specialization, and working in a team environment. So let's move on to our secondary team members. And we're just going to touch on this base on a real basic level. But your secondary team members are essentially going to support your activities as you get through the deal transaction phase and ownership phase. So that secondary team is going to be made up of your CPA. They're going to help with your finances, your taxes, auditing the financials for the property if you're doing an audit, just reconfirming numbers that are coming from your property manager at the end of the year, et cetera. So you do want a CPA on your team. Your syndication attorney. If you're going to be investing in a team, if you're going to be raising capital with limited partners, then that elevates the level of legalities that are involved in the transaction itself. Now, there are ways and there are times when people, they're not doing full SEC registrations. And by SEC, that's the Security and Exchange Commission. I would not tell you to do one way or the other. I would just advise you that when you are raising capital, you're doing it in substantial amounts, you do fall under SEC guidelines when it comes to selling securities, and there are legalities around that. So your syndication attorney is going to be the attorney who advises you, who prepares the paperwork, who prepares the syndication paperwork to allow you to legally raise capital from private investors and sell securities. Your licensed contractor is going to assist you with turning over your units, and they may help you with inspecting your units. They'll help you with developing the budget, your value add budget for the cost and the work that you're going to do when you go in and you purchase that property. There's going to be work that needs to be done. They'll help you with your budgeting to getting that together. And then, of course, your real estate broker. Your real estate broker will help you with deal flow, finding deals, negotiating deals, evaluating deals. Your real estate broker really does become or can become a good advisor in helping you along the way. And then your secondary team continue. Your property manager. Your property manager can also help with the construction phase and coming up with your budgeting numbers. They can also help you with analyzing deals, and you can leverage them as an additional voice, as an additional resource to help you ensure that you are that you're analyzing your deals accurately. So you want to be able to utilize them to help with your due diligence, and then also managing the property post-acquisition. Your real estate attorney. Your real estate attorney is going to be different from your syndication attorney. And remember earlier I talked about specialization. The real estate attorney is going to help you with your contracts, your operating agreements, your entity formations, and making sure you have the right entity, along with your CPA advisement from your CPA. They're going to help with your letters of intent and your purchase and sell agreements, things like that. And then the last two people we're going to talk about for our secondary team, and this list is not exhaustive, right? There are layers of team members that you need, but your second to last is going to be your commercial lender or broker. That commercial lender or broker is going to help you with securing the financing, securing the loan that you need, the debt that you need. And in commercial, we don't really utilize the term mortgage. It's considered debt. So they're going to help you secure the debt. And the difference between a lender and a broker is a lender typically works with one funding source, and a broker typically works with multiple funding sources. So the broker is going to have relationships with multiple lenders, essentially, and they're going to be able to provide you with a variety of lending options. Not to say that the lender won't, right? The lender may have multiple loan programs, but their criteria for their loan programs typically is not going to be as extensive as they are with the broker. So the broker can find and fit a number of different scenarios when it comes to the person or the people who are borrowing money. And then finally, your mentor. Your mentor is going to assist you with basically getting through your deal. They're going to act as a coach. They may also act as an investor, either a limited investor or a general partner, but basically they're going to advise you through the process as you build up your experience, as you build up your resume, as you build up your track record. So that's it for essentially your core investment team. Now, just to close out, if you are interested in potentially partnering with us on a future deal, when it comes to SEC guidelines, we have to establish an existing relationship. You want to be able to have a documented existing relationship communication with your partners, especially your limited partners, because again, there are some legalities around it. So there are different ways that we can go about, what's up, Carlos? We can go about establishing that relationship. You can send me an email. Now my email is here. You can send it to kevin@317capital.com. If you want to email my brokerage email, that's kevin.breckenridge@expcommercial.com. You can follow me on social @Legacy in Motion. You can sign up for our newsletter. But if you want to sign up for our newsletter, if you're watching this on Instagram, you can hit the link in my bio. There's a option for you to sign up for the newsletter, or you could go to my website, kevinsbreckenridge.com. There will be a pop-up window that will allow you to input your information. You just input your email, click submit, and you'll start receiving regular email communications from us. You could also join our text community. We have a text community. You can text #TMIC to 202-280-6700. Again, that's text #TMIC to 202-280-6700. And then finally, we also have a private investors community. We have a free community on Facebook for general networking. You can find it by searching the Multifamily Investors Collective. And then we have a paid community where we also have a lot more events and trainings and things like that, and engagement. You can find out more about that by going to the multifamilyinvestorscollective.com. So with that being said, that actually ends the presentation. So I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm going to double back on my Facebook. And what's up, Auntie? My aunt logged in from Cincinnati. I see you. And check out my LinkedIn just in case. Checking for comments. Looks like we're good. Comments or questions on IG. All right, so we finished before 8 o'clock. I feel good. My throat is killing me. But we finished before 8. So also be on the lookout. We have a couple of events coming up tomorrow and Wednesday. We've got an interview with Smitty Smith tomorrow for Wealth Talk Tuesdays. We're doing an IG collaboration with Ashley Thomas on Wednesday. There will be more information coming out. Just check my Instagram and my Facebook. I'll be posting about that shortly. But since it looks like we don't have any additional questions, I think we are good. We are good for tonight. So I appreciate you all for logging on. We'll be in touch. And if you need anything, check out all of my contact information and just hit me up. Send me a message. All right. Take care.